All right, so good morning to everyone. We are on page, we're on page 13B, B2, 13B2. And we're on the left-hand side, the bottom half of the column where it says the Megillah continues. But what I wanted to just mention before that, we talked a little bit about what it meant that Esther listened to her uncle or her husband or whoever we are eventually going to identify Mordechai as being. And then we didn't actually finish the rest of that paragraph. So we're actually before that. We're in the paragraph before that. So you know what? Let's start from the top. Okay. Now I'm getting adjusted here. Okay, the Megillah continues, the top of the page. Will somebody please read for us? Top of 13B2. Come on, somebody's got to be able to do this. Going once, going twice. It's the top of the page. There's nothing to get lost here. This is like, this is like the New York Public Library reading room. It's like dead silent. Okay. All right, I'm going to read. The Megillah continues. And the bidding of Mordechai, Esther did. Mar explains. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, this teaches that she used to show menstrual blood to the sages to determine if she was a nida. Okay, so the verse, if you look at, no, we don't have it at verse 16. We have it someplace else. Where is it? All right, I'll find it in Esther, and I'm going to read it to you because the point is that there's a redundancy in the verse. And this is what? Esther 2:20. So this is the verse. It says, Ein Esther magedet moladata v'etama kasher tziva alea Mordechai. Esther was not telling where she was born or what her people was, just as Mordechai commanded her. And then it says this part. So the second half of the verse is Ve'et ma'amar Mordechai Esther osa kasher hayta v'omna ito. And she would follow what Mordechai told her, just like when he took care of her. So the Gemara's implicit question is, we just said that she follows whatever he said. He told her not to tell anybody that she was Jewish, so she follows his instructions. So what does it mean then to say it again in the second half of the sentence, and she followed anything that Mordechai said? So this is, to tell us that she followed other things that Mordechai said. What other things could they be? So the answer is that she followed Mordechai's teaching that she shouldn't just rely on herself to determine whether she was a menstruant or not. What's the difference if she is? A menstruating woman is forbidden from sexual relations. And until she stops menstruating, and then she has to count 7 days, and then she has to go to the mikveh, and then she is then again eligible to engage in sexual relations. So Esther has been taken to be the queen for Achashverosh, and she is going to have to watch herself, and she is compliant. She abides by all the rules and regulations that the rabbis have set up, because sometimes you may have a discharge, a genital discharge, that may not qualify as menstrual blood. Who knows to differentiate between one kind of discharge and another? The rabbis who are trained to make these decisions. So a woman has to go to, whenever she has a question, is this a staining? Is this what kind of staining is it? she has to go to the rabbi to determine this. So last week we talked about the fact that this is a little bit of a kind of a demystification of menstruation, that it takes it out of being some kind of mysterious curse or taboo, and it makes it into just a real simple kind of, this is a biological fact of life, and let's get it straight. Nevertheless, the taboo aspect of it, and certainly it can't be divorced from the general gender role distinctions that were made then and that to a certain extent persist today. To be a woman is to be second class in many people's eyes. And what's more, giving birth, well, that's great. But menstruating is like the real dark side of being a woman, right? It's failing to give birth, and it's bloody and it's scary. And a lot of people have very, very negative feelings. They, cultures that create these kinds of negative feelings to this very day. There are a lot of efforts to try to help women, and especially younger women, when they're first entering into puberty, not feel ashamed about it. People that don't get the right care because they don't want to bring it up. What's the big deal? Go to the doctor, go to your gynecologist, and no, everybody gets very uptight about it and very ashamed. It's a tragedy. It's terrible. So the idea here is go to the expert. The problem is the expert invariably is a man. The sages are all males. So there is, at the same time that we're trying to demystify it, we're still ignoring one of the strong elements of the culture that will discourage people from taking this as a matter of fact kind of situation. I'm going to point out also this is Jewish culture. Jewish culture has a very, very strong anti-menstruant tradition. There's a very really powerful prejudice, for instance, that if a woman was menstruating, she shouldn't come to shul. I don't know if anybody here heard about such a prejudice, but it was a very strong prejudice in certain communities to this very day. In certain communities, it's a prejudice because it's this kind of like suspicious taboo. She's ritually impure. Ritually impure means you've got the cooties. Don't go into the synagogue. The synagogue is a sacred place. Don't touch the Torah, God forbid. And these are all wrong. They're all absolutely incorrect. But go tell people that they're wrong. They're convinced that they're right. These are strong, entrenched practices and viewpoints within Jewish tradition that the rabbis kept on fighting against, and unsuccessfully. So how do we look at this? Here we have a compliant, as I say, submissive, obedient woman who says, yes, I will go to the sages. Today, with these issues becoming a little bit more recognized in general, and then the Jewish community following suit and saying, oh, look, people in general are being more aware of feminist values and so on. So it penetrates into the Jewish community as well. So the non-Orthodox community doesn't care about any of this stuff. But the Orthodox community still does care about these rules. So in the Orthodox community, we have this tension that you have, in certain pockets of the community, a feeling of, on the one hand, that we want to abide by these rules. This is the Torah. This is God's rule. This is inviolable. This is something we have to follow. On the other hand, we're not. We don't want to be treated as second-class beings. We don't want to be ashamed. We don't want to be, humiliated, and of course, in some cases, made vulnerable to the male gaze. So there's over the last generation, there is a new phenomenon. At least it's new in the sense of being made very official and recognized, and that is to have women be in charge of women's issues. And that means that they have to do some very, very, very serious learning. They have to learn a lot of Gemara. They have to learn a lot of Jewish law. They have to do, they have to really get actually trained materially, literally, in terms of seeing what things look like and what things count. Just like a person has to be trained, for instance, for kashrut. What does the lung have to look like? What kind of scars or lesions or problems in the animal's body make it treif? You have to actually get real. You can't just read the Gemara. So there's a story about one of the great Talmudic teachers at the beginning of the 20th century, Baruch Ber. He was very affectionately called Baruch Ber Leibovich. He was a student of Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, the famous Rabbi Soloveitchik of our time, Rabbi Soloveitchik's grandfather, who was also a Talmudic genius. And he had one of his favorite students was this Rabbi Baruch Ber. And Baruch Ber was a very gentle person and a very unassuming person. And one time he was he was someplace, and somebody took out the pupik of the chicken, and he says, "Oh, look at this kurkavan," and Reb Baruch Ber said, "Whoa! So that's what the Gemara is talking about? So that's the Gemara's heilige, holy kurkavan, is this thing?" Because he just knew it as an abstraction. He knew it as, he could analyze it to death, in the Talmudic discussion, but he actually never knew physically what it was. So you have to know these things. It wasn't his job to, make decisions about kosher and treif. He just was a Talmud genius. So in this field, the idea was to train women so that women could then feel comfortable and willing to ask these questions from someone that they trusted and who they felt would respect them. So this is a whole new phenomenon in the Orthodox Jewish world. And it's specifically recognizing that we can't simply just poo-poo it and say, okay, be like Esther, just go to the sages, just listen to that man who told you what to do, right? This is what this text says, right? That's what she was, a good, nice, obedient Jewish girl. And in our time, the idea is, maybe we have to be a little bit more sophisticated in our sensitivities. Geraldine.
Just a question. Who taught the sages the different degrees? How did they know?
That was part of the curriculum. That was part of what they were taught, just like the priests. The priests had to learn how to make the sacrifices. The priests had to learn how to look at a person who had skin afflictions to decide what counts as tzarat and what not. These were, trade secrets. These were what you got, you apprenticed to somebody who knew it, and that's how it got passed down to you. You couldn't learn it from a book. Certainly in those days they didn't have, YouTubes to be able to show you how to change the battery, in whatever it is. I mean, that's how do we learn these things today? You have to see it. You have to have somebody show it to you. Okay, so that's the first part.
I have a question.
Oh, okay, sure. Okay, wait. So Geraldine still has the floor, and then we go to Merle.
Oh,
No, it's not about that. I finally found the Megillah in my
I lost
thing.
sound.
So if you want me to
Okay, so you'll continue reading in a second.
you
Okay?
you
Okay.
just have to tell me where.
All right, Merle, where are you? Go.
Yeah. So while we were reading about Esther and Mordecai and Ashveros, I was thinking exactly the same thing about what they're doing, what they do today. Why? I mean, we didn't have doctors in those days. They didn't have male doctors.
Of course.
Back then? No, they had midwives delivering babies and taking care,
Oh,
teaching the
delivering a
girls
baby,
and.
delivering a baby, no, but they had
But
doctors.
they were involved with women's things and teaching the girls about their periods and things. Why didn't they? And they were, everybody was, modest and, you can't show this and all that kind of stuff. Why didn't they teach women? I mean, have women, authorize women to do this?
So anybody want to weigh in on this? Excellent question. How do these things, I mean, obviously it's complicated, but how does this kind of work culturally speaking? So, all right, I would suggest first, it depends, fields of knowledge get graded by people, right? Certain things, knowing certain things, you have to, I mean, just a second ago, it's necessary to know a lot of different things, but knowing certain things is not as valued as knowing some other things. There become hierarchies that we grade knowledge by. So when women had to, take care of themselves and had to make sure that they stayed healthy enough to be able to have a baby, for a long time that was considered women's stuff. So the women's stuff was just not important. It was taken care of by women. And the more classy kind of literally classy, the classier kind of knowledge was reserved for people of a higher class. The problem with menstruation is that it has religious ramifications. It has legal ramifications. If you're a menstruant, then you're ritually impure. If you're a menstruant, you can't sleep with your husband. If you're not a menstruant, you're not ritually impure. You can sleep with your husband. So this, has the legal ramifications, take it out of the simple biological knowledge, material knowledge, and it turns it into quote unquote Torah. And Torah belongs to the men, right? Because the men are the custodians of what's important. And the other stuff is just, the way the world works. Cows give birth, women give birth. That's not a big, field of knowledge. So the women were able to stay in control of that kind of like womanly stuff if it didn't have legal ramifications for the men. Once it became legally significant to the man takes over. Right. And I'm not saying this is an apology. I'm saying this is a description, and that we should understand this is the way power gets taken over. People who have power, who want power, decide what is it worth, where is the power, what do we need to be powerful about? What can we disregard, and what do we have to control? So menstrual status was something that the men had to control. Right.
That makes sense.
And today, also that's the whole thing, that the professionalization stuff, then it becomes important. Anything that before, it used to be, taken care of by anybody, but now it's a profession, so then it becomes a big deal. Okay, so Geraldine, are you ready to read?
Yeah, where are we?
So on 13b2, left-hand side, left-hand column, right?
Yes,
So if you see the Gemara explains,
yes.
then go down 3 lines. The end of the sentence, at the end of the line goes the verse, and
Okay.
it concludes.
The verse concludes, just as she was when she was raised with him. Rabbi Bar Lima said in the name of Rav, this indicates that she used to rise from the bosom of Achashverosh and immerse herself and sit in the bosom of Mordechai. Okay,
so now this is already a little sticky, right? What the Gemara is imagining, and it's just exacerbating a question that's in the text anyway. What is going on with Esther and Achashverosh, right? She's chosen to be the queen. So clearly there is a sexual liaison happening between Achashverosh and Esther. So that's, first of all, in and of itself, problematic for us. What's going on here? Why is it okay for her to be sleeping with this guy? And she seems to be willingly going into it, right? She goes and enters the contest, and she does everything she can to win the contest. It doesn't say that she tried to sabotage her chances. So what's that? And now we up the ante even more, and we say, guess what? Not only was she sleeping with Achashverosh, but she was continuing to sleep with her husband Mordechai. That's now how the last part of this verse is being read. Ve'et ma'amar Mordechai Esther osa, and the bidding of Mordechai, or the word ma'amar means speech, it's the saying from the word amar, to say something. A ma'amar is then a saying. Whatever Mordechai said, Esther did. And this is read now in sexual terms. Mordechai said, let's sleep together. She agreed. Mordechai said, let's do it this way. She agreed. So we have a very, very now explicit picture that Esther goes back and forth between sleeping with Mordechai and sleeping with Achashverosh. What gives? What do we make of this? Anybody have any ideas? Anybody have any comments? Any reactions? Geraldine.
Just a question. Was she literally sleeping with Mordecai, or does it mean that she was just following the laws of Mordecai?
So that's the original idea, was that she's just following the laws. This suggestion goes much further. And unless we decide that we can't take it, we're going to take his statement at face value. She is actually having sexual relations with Mordecai. Okay, we'll see that some people were so uncomfortable with that idea that they ended up wiggling out of it. But for now, the simplest way of reading his statement is she would sleep with Achashverosh, and then she would go to the mikveh, and then she would sleep with Mordechai. Right? Okay, Helen, you don't look so happy. I can't hear you. You're muted. No, still can't hear you. Come closer to the mic. No. See where it says at the bottom of your screen, mute, unmute. You have to just click the unmute. All right, we'll come back to you. Did somebody else want to say something? All right. So, Helen, we'll come back to you soon. Let's do Geraldine.
Yes.
Let's look at note 18.
Okay. After rising from her forced relations with Achashverosh, she would return to her true husband, Mordecai, but would first bathe to cleanse herself of all traces of Achashverosh's relations, so that she would not be repulsive to the righteous Mordecai.
Thus,
the verse is explained to mean that Esther did the bidding of the sage Mordecai. She presented her nidah questions to him and followed his rulings in the matter. Although a married woman who has relations with another man thereby becomes forbidden to her husband, this applies only if she's willingly had relationships with the other man. But if she was forced into having relations with him, then she remains permitted to her husband unless her husband is a Kohen. As the Gemara on 15a states, Esther's relations with Achashverosh were in the category of forced relations.
okay. So this now brings us, into the idea that yes, Esther has to sleep with Achashverosh. She has no choice. Helen, did you figure out to unmute?
Well, yeah, I got it now.
You did. I hear you loud and clear. Yeah, good. All right. Yeah.
I would have listened to you an hour ago if I could have figured it out before. Anyway, I'm sorry.
That's
But
okay.
that every time I read that, it occurred, it seemed to mention that he was her uncle or a senior that she listened to, but not, where does it mention that this was her husband and she had relations with him? I mean, you pointed it out, now I see it, but I certainly
Well,
didn't.
I'm just following this is the Gemara's midrash, right? This is the Gemara's expansion of the story, saying, no, you got to look a little under the surface of the text. The text says things in a simple kind of way, but really, we know what the text is really saying,
I see.
and this is what they're imagining is happening. Now, of course, when it comes to Achashverosh, it's pretty obvious. What the Gemara is now doing, as I said, is it's actually exacerbating the problem, because we still have the problem with Achashverosh himself, and now what we have is the Gemara kind of doubling up on the situation. But from the Megillah, the Gemara is not making up the fact that she slept with Achashverosh. That's pretty clear from the story. What the Gemara is saying is, and guess what? She also nevertheless kept on sleeping with Mordechai. So let's take the Achashverosh part first. All right, so the Achashverosh part, as a real problem, it's discussed over and over again in the Gemara and in commentaries. What do we do with this? Why? How can she do this? We also have, for instance, a rule that there are three. Human life is sacrosanct, right? We do everything we can to save a human life. However, there are three transgressions in Jewish tradition which are not allowed to save a life. So the famous one is you're not allowed to kill somebody else in order to save yourself. Right? You're not allowed to commit murder in order to save your life. So if somebody puts a gun to your head and says, I want you to now take this other gun and shoot so-and-so, or else I'm going to kill you. You're not allowed to shoot so-and-so. You're supposed to let yourself be shot and killed rather than commit murder.
Kill somebody else.
So because your life and their life are equally infinitely precious. So you can't do an active action to transgress. Rather than you should die innocent and not have transgressed the terrible murder prohibition, the prohibition against murder. So that's one. Another one is to worship idols. If a person says, I'm going to shoot you if you don't bow down to that idol, then you're not allowed to bow down to the idol. You have to let yourself get killed. And this is, again, one of the, in Jewish history, this is something that has happened over and over again. The refusal of Jews to abandon Judaism and engage in worship of other gods. So that's another one. And then there's a third. And the third one is transgressing the prohibitions in the Torah of adultery and incest. Not allowed to transgress those prohibitions. So according to the Gemara, Esther is married to Mordechai. She's not, just his favorite niece. So she's a married woman. So she sleeps with another man. That's adultery. That's adultery. She's not allowed to commit adultery. So how is it that she is walking into this situation and engaging in this relationship with Achashverosh? So, Merle, you're raising your hand?
You blanked out. Well, I mean, I lost voice just right before now, so I missed maybe what you said. But maybe she committed adultery because she was saving lives. She wanted to save the lives of her people, or this was the plot to save the lives of her people.
All
So
right.
that's what she had to do.
So you're making a distinction. It's one thing, you're not allowed to commit adultery to save your own life, but you may be allowed to commit adultery to save other people's lives. right? That's what you're suggesting. Okay, so that's an interesting idea. It's not simply saving your own skin, but she's doing this on behalf of others, right? On behalf of the Jewish people. An interesting distinction. And we're going to hold these things. We're not going to solve anything. We're going to hold these things in abeyance. We'll get to, like I said, the Gemara's discussion, as the note says, in another couple of pages. But that would be one way to get out of it. Here, what is being said in the note is that she's not willingly doing this. This is considered coercion. She's not. Everything that looks like, again, Helen's point, what does the story actually look like when we look at it? When we look at it, she looks like she's just, she's keeping her Jewish identity secret, but she's definitely willingly going along with this whole story. She's entering the contest and so on. From the Gemara's perspective, it seems, and we've talked about this now more than once, the Gemara has been weaving a story and a perspective of anxiety about Jewish survival, about the tenuousness of the Jewish community's place in the Persian Empire. That's why she's not telling who she is. This is like the secret kind of spy story, so to speak. So somehow or other, we are seeing from the Gemara's perspective, this is not just for prestige. This is not because, oh, I want my my beautiful niece to win fame and fortune as as a movie star. No, this is taken. The decision is taken with great trepidation, and out of a sense of there is no choice. If we don't do this, we're goners, right? If we don't have Esther succeed in this plot, then we're all lost. This it's not an obvious kind of explanation, and it's not. It doesn't necessarily answer all of the questions. The questions are going to keep on multiplying. What I want to point out is that now the Gemara doesn't simply throw away that problem. It makes the problem worse, right? On the one hand, it acknowledges she's going to have to sleep with Achashverosh. But then the Gemara says, and then guess what? Then she's going to willingly sleep with her husband. It's very hard to comprehend the kind of stress, the mental anguish that a person would have to go through this kind of situation. There's and you have when she goes to the mikveh, you think about stories that we hear about somebody has an affair, they have to come back to their spouse, they have to go take a shower first to wash away the scent, to wash away the experience of sleeping with the person they're having an affair with, and then they make believe nothing happened. In a sense here, of course, there's no subterfuge. Mordechai knows exactly what's happening. Right? Mordechai really, he set her up for this.
He encourages her.
Yeah. So it's not quite the same thing, but nevertheless, this idea of going to the mikveh is what the note is alluding to. Is it's not necessary halachically. It's not necessary in any kind of strict legal requirement. It's a symbolic act of purification for the sake of literally washing away what I just did and now making believe I'm a different person. So this appalling image is really, putting so much more into the struggle that we would not really see so much of what Esther is going through if we just read the text on its own. How do we feel about this idea of her sleeping here and then sleeping there?
I have two thoughts. I was going to write it, but I'll just say it.
Good.
How does this connect with the story of Abraham and Sarah in Egypt? It's the first story.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, how does this connect with the hypersexualization of the story in the descriptions of Queen Vashti? I mean, is this now you sort of read that out as part of the whole Purim, reversal, exaggeration, hiddenness. So is this just another step in this sort of descent of the rabbis into, the fantasies of sexuality? So that's one thing. But I'm more concerned with the first thing, because although you can play with what really happens to Sarai when she's taken by the first Egyptian king, it's fairly clear that she has sex with him. And she does it to save her husband from possible harm or death. So is there a connection?
So we'll talk about the Abraham and Sarah thing for a second, and then the other thing, maybe, who knows if we'll be able to deal with it. I don't read the story the way you just read it. I think that if you look at the whether she has sex with Pharaoh, it seems actually from the story that she doesn't, that God intervenes and stops it from happening. But what is taken for granted at the beginning of the story is that Abraham, and we've talked about this more than once, you and I, that Abraham takes it for granted that she is going to be abducted and taken away. And there's nothing he can do about it. What he simply wants her to do is lie about his relationship with her so that he will not be killed. You might say he's not being heroic or whatever, and there's plenty of grumbling, in the tradition about how he handles that situation. But it's not, to my way of reading the story, it's not that she's sleeping with Pharaoh to save him. She's lying to Pharaoh about who he is to save him. And whether she's going to end up sleeping with Pharaoh or not is out of their control. That's the way I read the story. And then God comes in and stops Pharaoh from being able to sleep with her. And then that's when Pharaoh gets this, so something's up here. Why did you lie to me?
Okay, so I'm confused. I thought there were two stories.
There are.
I know, and in the first one, she doesn't sleep with Pharaoh too? I know the second one she doesn't.
Right. So I don't think so in the first one either.
Okay, I was just mistaken.
We'll check it out in a few weeks. So we'll be able to look at it more closely. So that's the way I understand the story. So now coming back to this, there all through, I don't know how you're taking what I said about the Vashti story. I don't think I was trying to dismiss it. I think I was acknowledging that it participates in a very sexualized, stereotypical attitude toward the people that we hate, partly though historically conditioned by the fact that we suffered similar kinds of degradation, coming in our direction. So that's what I remember saying about the Vashti stuff. But yeah, for sure, there's definitely here a kind of knowing, and back to the hiddenness of the story. Sex is the great secret of civilization, right? And we nowadays we are a little bit more upfront about it, but all the upfrontness that we do actually doesn't even touch anything in terms of any person's specific experience of this. Our own experiences are still a secret to to 99.99999% of the world. So even when we talk about it from here till tomorrow, and even if we show images and so on, sex is the big secret of human existence in many ways. And that, I think, is part of what's going on here too. The rabbis are, on the one hand, you can say they're engaging in these kinds of fantasies. Is it prurient? Is it really just, kind of like really irresponsible? Hold on a second. Yeah. Is it irresponsible? Is it just for titillation? Is it just to, for men and boys to just get off on these kinds of things? I don't know. I would like to think that it's not that, although I don't want to dismiss that as an element of it. I think that we have learned from from everything that I was talking about before about modern self-awareness, that we're kidding ourselves if we don't think that many times we've had the occasion to to objectify women, to misuse women, to be not self-aware about our own sexual problems. But on the other hand, I think that there's a kind of an honesty here. I think that there is an honesty about the hiddenness of this dimension. And certainly when thinking about what here the story really is a given, she's sleeping with Achashverosh. There's no ambiguity about that in the story. And then to think beyond that, about what does that mean for this woman? What does that mean for a person if we buy the fact that she's a secret agent, if we buy the fact that she is not somebody who's just trying to like I say advance herself or advance her own image, her own career. What's going on in her own life? And what this picture gives us is, on the one hand, you could see it as hypersexual. Look, they just multiplied how many times she's sleeping with people. On the other hand, it makes it into a tremendous tragedy. It makes it into like I say, I think the mental anguish is palpable. With at the same time, and I want to add the next thing is to believe that maybe does she have a safe haven this whole time that she's stuck with Achashverosh? Does she have anywhere to turn? Does she have anywhere to put her head down, literally, and feel safe and be who she is? So, yeah, on the one hand, this is about sex. On the other hand, it's about that she does what she needs to do, but she also has a home. So it's very, very complicated. It's very, 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 I think, nuanced and multi-layered. And they're all, and what I'm not saying all the layers are great. There's some very bad layers, and there's also some very good layers.
But
That's what I would say.
I just wanted to reintroduce the whole context of Purim within Judaism. The getting drunk, the losing inhibitions, the whole reversal of roles stuff. That's all part of kind of the medieval possibility of excess in an otherwise very controlled environment. I just want to put that back on the table.
Right. So not just medieval. It's because this is pre-medieval. It didn't only happen in medieval times. It happened from the beginning of time in general, right? So yeah, how do we allow so many of the things that are boiling inside of us? How do we give them safe venting, right? So that's what Carnival is all about, and Dionysian rituals that are pre-medieval and so on. So yeah, Purim definitely participates in that tension the struggle of our contradictory natures as human beings, and the struggle of how you actually approach Purim also is part of that. Do you really let everything loose? Do you really go to excess? So within the Jewish community, there have been pushes and pulls back and forth about that too. Once we have Purim with these elements in it, how much do we exacerbate those elements? How much do we let those elements have free reign? How much do we just safely let a little bit of the steam out, but not go bonkers about it? I've mentioned already, other times, that when I came to Shomrei, I took the liquor out of the shul. I took it out of the sanctuary on Purim. Some people, obviously, for a while before that, thought that this was absolutely legitimate. And I said, no, I'm sorry, it's not. Simchas Torah became Purim. Simchas Torah, we're going to have Simchas Torah soon, right? God willing. There's an example of taking something that's not Purim, but then taking advantage of Purim and turning it into Purim. Turning Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah literally means, right, the simcha of the Torah, the rejoicing, the being happy of the Torah. So what does that mean? There's nothing in the Talmud that says, because Simchas Torah actually doesn't even exist in the Talmud, but there's nothing in the Talmud that says you should get drunk on Simchas Torah so that you don't know the difference between the Torah and idolatry. But what happens within the folk life? Happy is happy. Happy is happy hour. Happy is getting a drink. So Simchas Torah took some of the stuff from Purim and turned it in, and turned Simchas Torah. Some people took that Purim and turned Simchas Torah into Purim. It's not what Simchas Torah is supposed to be about. But then the question is, well, what's Purim supposed to be about? Is Purim supposed to be what Purim is? How Purim-y should Purim be? Like I said, these are struggles historically. These are struggles with different kinds of temperaments. It's obviously easier for a person who doesn't like to get drunk not to get drunk on Purim. But what about the people who like to have a good drink? So the person who doesn't like to drink says to the person who likes to drink, you shouldn't do that. So go take care of yourself. But those are things that are happening within the struggle. How much leeway does Purim really mean to give to people? Is an ongoing question. When you tell a joke, how much do you belabor a joke? So some people, I got the joke. You tell the joke, good, I got it. I got it. So enough. And for some people, you got to tell the joke and you got to tell the joke. So I don't mean like tell the joke more than once in your life. I mean like just, hack the joke. So the same thing with Purim. If I get the idea and I run with it, is that enough? Is Purim, how much should Purim be this kind of like intellectual examination of the paradoxes and absurdity of existence, and how much should Purim be carnival? It's a question that everybody deals with in their own way. Okay, so back to here. The Megillah continues.
The Megillah continues. In those days, while Mordechai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigsan and Teresh became angry, and they planned to assassinate King Achashverosh. The Gemara notes, Reb Chaya bar Abba said in the name of Reb Yochanan, the Holy One, blessed is he, caused the master to be angry with his servants in order to fulfill the will of a righteous man. And who was this righteous man? Joseph. As it says, and and there with us was a Hebrew youth, etc. And conversely, the Holy One, blessed is he, caused servants to be angry with their master in order to perform a miracle for a righteous man. And who was this righteous man? Mordechai, as it is written, and the matter became known to Mordechai, etc.
Okay, so here's again another kind of reversal or a kind of mirror imaging insight. So right after we have this story, we have a shift of scene, and we get this little palace intrigue stuff where Bigtan and Teresh are two courtiers, and they hatch a plot to kill the king. And Mordechai overhears it. And then Mordechai tells Esther, and then Esther tells the king in Mordechai's name. And then they capture Bigtan and Teresh, and they foil the plot, and they write down that this all happened in the book, and then they forget about it, right? And then it happens, and then you have to wait a bunch of chapters later until this comes back into the story. So now we're starting this story. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that here we have a reversal of another story of a palace intrigue. In the story of Pharaoh and Joseph, Pharaoh gets angry at his chief butler and his chief baker. So why was that? So this is machinations by God. Why did God make Pharaoh get angry at them? So that they would then get thrown into jail. Then they would meet Joseph. Then Joseph would interpret their dreams. Then one of them would get hanged and one of them would come back. And then the person who came back would then tell Pharaoh after a couple of years, oh, I remember there was this Hebrew slave that was in prison that knew how to interpret dreams, and Pharaoh needs this, and then Joseph is raised out of prison. So the whole thing, says Rabbi Chia, was one big gigantic game, starting with Pharaoh getting angry at his servants. He got angry at his servants just to be able to start that process that eventually came about to bring the tzaddik, the righteous person, Yosef HaTzaddik, into the fore to be able to do what he needed to do, right? And eventually, of course, he saves the Jewish people. So he says now that's the master getting angry at the servants, which is usual. Masters get angry at servants all the time. That's what makes them feel like they're masters. We talked a little bit about anger before in the Pirkei Avot session. So that's to be expected. But the idea that the servants are getting angry at their masters, interesting. What another kind of absurdity that the Purim story gives us. So these servants are getting angry at their master, but that's also only so that Mordechai would be able to hear it, and then that would say, start the wheels turning, and eventually, of course, that saves the Jewish people also. Okay. So now, what's this deal with Bigtan and Teresh? So the Gemara now relates.
The Gemara now relates the plan of Bigtan and Teresh to poison the king and how Mordechai was able to discover it. Rabbi Yochanan said, Bigtan and Teresh were two Tarsians, and they were conversing in the Tarsian language and saying to each other within earshot of Mordechai, from the day this woman came to the palace, we have not gotten any sleep. Come, let us place poison in the bowl from which Ahasuerus drinks so that he should die. But they did not know that Mordechai was of those who sat in the chamber of hewn stone, and he knew the 70 languages of the world. Mordechai therefore understood everything they said and told Esther to warn Ahasuerus about their plot to kill him.
Okay. So here's the setup now. They're imagining that Bigtan and Teresh have some kind of axe to grind. Why are they so upset? Why do they want to kill the king? They want to kill the king because of a coup d'etat. They just want to be the king. Well, which one would be the king? We're going to come a little bit into that in a second. So they make up this story. Coming back to the discussions we've had already before, what do they end up saying? Whoa, this is disgusting. The king, ever since he took this queen, we can't get any sleep. So how does why can't they get any sleep? Why wouldn't they be able to get any sleep? What does this sound like to anybody?
Noisy lovemaking.
Bedroom carousing.
Right.
Bedroom carousing.
Bedroom carousing. Mark, what were you saying?
Noisy lovemaking.
Noisy lovemaking, right? Their quarters are down right under the king's bedroom, and it's like they make a racket all night long. It's disgusting. So all right. So here you have the rabbis are having a good time imagining what's going on. Let's throw this back into what we said before, that this is also in some way being forced upon Esther. Right. So on the one hand, it's funny. On the other hand, it's creepy. And somehow or other, they're not happy. You have a note here which goes through a whole bunch of different speculations. It's all speculative, but certainly it has something to do with the fact that they're unhappy with this sexual relationship that is impinging on their comfort. So they decide that they want to kill him. Then they start talking about it. And Mordechai is right there. This is the implicit question. How does Mordechai know that Bigtan and Teresh are hatching this plot? How does he have access to that information? So the answer that the Gemara suggests here is because they're talking in a language that they assume that the guy doesn't understand. They don't have to worry about this guy being within earshot because they're talking in their own private language. They're not talking Persian, they're talking Tarsian, whatever that is. And Mordechai, they don't know that Mordechai really knows this language. Why does Mordechai know this language? Because he was a member of the Sanhedrin. He was a member of the sages' court. And in order to be a member of the sages' court, you had to know all the languages of the world. This is the Gemara's description. They had to know the 70 languages of the world. Why? Why would that be a requirement for a member of the Sanhedrin?
So you could communicate and understand what was going on.
So have somebody translate it for you. Put those little earbuds into your ear and like at the UN, and just listen to what's going on. So the answer is because no, this is an anti-translation view, right? This is saying that no, if the Sanhedrin members need to make decisions, even life and death decisions that are going to depend on listening to people who are going to talk different kinds of language, let them not be dependent on a translator. They have to learn all of these languages themselves because otherwise, who knows what's going to get lost in translation or changed in translation and messed up in translation. When I came back from living in Israel, for a while I did translation work, and I did work in courts also. What a responsibility! I mean, it's really tough, and it's so it's hard enough to listen to a person talking the language that you think you know, to actually hear it from a person who listened to the other person and then is trying to tell you in a translation what you think you can remember what the other person said. It's quite a challenge. So Jewish law states in theory, the Sanhedrin, which was the high court, the supreme court of the Jewish people, and was the court that was in charge of the hardest capital cases, every single member of the Sanhedrin had to be, completely multilingual. So this is the what they didn't understand about Mordechai. And again, back to this theme that Mark rightly points out. This is a Purim-y kind of element, right? Another hiddenness kind of thing. That there's this guy that's that they don't think he's anybody they have to worry about. Sorry. Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. Wait. Oh, okay, good. So and yet, they're wrong. They don't know that this hidden aspect of Mordechai exists, and of course, it's completely crucial to the ongoing unfolding of the story. All right, keep going. The conversation.
Okay. The conversation between Big Son and Teresh continued. One said to the other, "But my post and your post are not the same. How then can we carry out our plan?" The other said to him, "I will guard my post and your post, and thus it is written." And the matter was investigated, and it was found out that they were not found at their posts.
Right.
Megillah continues.
Wait. Okay, so
Oh.
that's so there's some kind of like taking turns here, or how they're going to collaborate, and they're one person is going to punch in the punch card for the for the other person to cover up that they're not there, but then vayibukasha davar vayimatzei, the matter was looked into, and either it was found out or he was found out. The person who wasn't between Bigtan and Teresh, the one who didn't show up to be in their proper place, was found out. Okay, so this is their way of reading that extra little phrase. Okay, we have a couple more minutes.
The Megillah continues. After these things, the Gemara inquires.
Just take a look. Just take a look, please, for a second. What's that verse? Number 31.
Okay, let's see. The entire verse reads, after these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hamdan the Agagite, and advanced him, he and his seat, above all the officers who were with him.
Okay, so this is the next turn in the plot, right? That Haman now becomes significant. So after these things, Haman gets elevated and promoted into his position. After what things, asks the Gemara? After what?
What is the verse conveying by connecting Haman's accusation to power, specifically?
Ascension to power.
I'm sorry, Haman's ascension to power, specifically to the preceding events recorded in the Megillah. Should I go on?
What happened right before? What happened right before is this uncovering of the plot, right? So on the one hand, it sounds like a non sequitur, because the Megillah tells us about this little palace intrigue and that it's thwarted, right? And then we forget about it, and now comes Haman onto the scene. So what's the connection between the two? Why do we say and now Haman came after that? What's the difference? Haman could have come even before that. The fact that there's a plot and that Mordechai uncovers, and therefore he'll get credit for it later. Great. Who cares when that happened? The point is that we've got Haman now to worry about. So why is the Megillah saying, "Oh, and look at this, it happened after that"? Could have happened before also. So the answer is, the Gemara answers,
Rava said, only after the Holy One, blessed is he, created a remedy for the affliction did he send the affliction. For Reish Lakish said, the Holy One, blessed is he, does not smite Israel unless he has created a remedy for them beforehand. As it says, when I heal Israel, then the iniquity of Ephraim will be revealed, and Only then will they be punished.
But
But in the case of the other nations of the world, it is not so. Rather, God smites them, and only afterwards does he create a remedy. As it says, and Hashem will smite Egypt, smiting and healing.
okay, so this is a well-known statement that God never brings an affliction before creating the remedy ahead of time. So the remedy is in place, and then the illness, the suffering, the problem then becomes manifest, but the solution or the healing is already in existence. So that's the situation that we have here. How so? The affliction is Haman, right? Haman is the trouble. But in order to get rid of Haman, we need Mordechai to have some kind of standing, to have the ability in the end to intervene and stop him. So that's why the story of Bigtan and Teresh, with their plot that is then thwarted thanks to Mordechai, that happens first, and then Haman comes in. So Mordechai is already put into a good position to be, when he's needed, he'll be able to come out and save the Jewish people. Right, so that's why the Megillah says it's after that. It's only after we had this reservoir of a power, of a solution to take care of our needs. Only then did God then make it happen so that Haman would begin to start causing trouble. So this is God's looking out for our welfare by making sure that whatever bad things happen, they're never in a vacuum, but there's always something there that's going to help us cope with that bad thing. It's already there. We don't have to start dealing with it afterwards, right? We see now when, just as we keep going, whenever it's reactive, if there's no proactive preparation to deal with it, with a problem, with a disaster, so much time is lost, so many lives are lost, so much pain and suffering is multiplied, and the problem, just has a head start. Literally, has a head start on the solution. If the solution can be somehow put into motion ahead of time, it mitigates, it minimizes the problem. So that's what these sages are. Say that's what happened with the story, but that's only God's solicitude for the Jewish people. For the rest of the world, God lets that problems happen, and then God decides to send the solution afterwards. So there's a delay, and the delay, of course, can be catastrophic, but that's the way of the world. So this kind of dichotomy that the Gemara is suggesting functions in a number of ways, right? It functions in a positive way and it functions in a negative way. Functions in a negative way in the sense of, so therefore good, let the goyim suffer, let the goyim get their comeuppance, let the goyim be in as much problems as possible, and then if they can get out of it, so gesinter hate, but they don't deserve special treatment. That's the negative. And the positive is that God will never abandon the Jewish people. No matter how much pain and suffering we go through, there's always a silver lining. There's always something that's been prepared ahead of time by God to be able to help us get through this. So it's a kind of a comfort and a consolation for the Jewish people. Obviously, the moral, calculus here is certainly questionable, certainly something to be looked at. From the rabbi's perspective, it wasn't questionable. There was no question about it, that we didn't deserve the kind of suffering that we got, and that the goyim deserved the kind of suffering that they brought about on their own. So that's where we're going to stop right now. And to be continued after the holidays, I want to wish everyone a Shana Tova U'Metuka, a sweet, good year, a better year this year, a better year even than the way it is at this very moment. I hope for everybody. And look out for the announcements of when we resume. Okay? Zeig gesund, everybody.
You.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Shana Tova.
Dasher Koa.